What if one photo, just one, could change everything? She was a quiet financial analyst, hiding a secret that could destroy her career. He was a powerful CEO, never expecting to see the woman he spent one unforgettable night with. Again. But when she accidentally dropped her ultrasound in front of him, and he saw the date printed on it, his world stopped. Was it really his baby? And if it was, what now? This isn't just a story about unexpected parenthood. It's about second chances, buried pasts, and a kind of love that refuses to be forgotten. Stay with me, because what happens next will break your heart and put it back together. The ultrasound photo fluttered to the ground, like a leaf caught in the breeze, light, fragile, and yet heavy with the weight of untold truths. It slid across the polished tile floor of the bustling corporate lobby, coming to a gentle stop at the feet of a sharply dressed man in a tailored gray suit. Jackson Carter, CEO of Carter & Crest Technologies, didn't usually glance down when he walked, but something about the sudden stillness around him made him pause. His assistant had just handed him the morning analytics report, but now his sharp blue eyes were locked on the small black and white photo on the ground. He bent down slowly, lifting the image in his hand. He froze. The date stamped in the corner, May 2026. 11 weeks after the gala, and just above it, unmistakable, the outline of a tiny heartbeat. A 12-week ultrasound. He looked up, his gaze meeting that of the woman standing frozen a few feet away, her face pale, her eyes wide with dread. "Miss Dawson," he said, slowly holding out the photo, "I believe you dropped this." Samantha Dawson, 29, composed, brilliant, felt her entire body tighten. Her heart pounded as she took the photo back with a trembling hand. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," she whispered quickly, tucking it into her folder. I was just heading to the finance department meeting." Jackson didn't move. His eyes remained locked on her. The entire floor, a hum of corporate urgency, only moments ago seemed to shrink into silence. The name Dawson tugged at something distant in his mind, but it wasn't her last name that echoed. It was the memory of her laughter. That night, 11 weeks ago. The glittering New Hope Foundation gala, held under chandeliers where champagne flowed and names were forgotten, but not faces. He remembered her, not just the dress or the smile, but how she spoke about teaching art to inner-city kids, how they'd both slipped away from the ballroom and wandered the rooftop talking about everything and nothing, how they'd kissed like it meant more than just one night, how she left before sunrise without leaving her name. And now, this, "Miss Dawson," he said more quietly this time, "I'd like to speak with you in my office." There was no command in his voice, but no option either. Samantha nodded, her lips pressed tightly together. She hadn't expected this. She'd spent the past 7 weeks avoiding this exact moment, keeping her head down, slipping out of meetings early, avoiding the executive floor like it was cursed. As she followed him toward the elevator, her mind raced. What had she been thinking joining his company? She told herself back then that it was too big, too structured. He'd never even know she was there. That one night didn't mean anything, at least not to him. But the universe didn't care about timing, or consequences, or job descriptions. The elevator doors slid closed behind them, enclosing the two of them in a silence thick with memory. The hum of the building faded. All Samantha could hear was the blood rushing in her ears, and the faint crinkle of the ultrasound tucked between paper charts in her folder. Jackson didn't look at her. He stared straight ahead, his jaw set, the weight of suspicion building behind his unreadable expression. The elevator chimed as it reached the executive level. This wasn't how she imagined telling him. In fact, she'd imagined never telling him at all. As they stepped into his sleek corner office, steel and glass with a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline, Samantha knew she was running out of time to keep secrets. The moment the ultrasound hit the floor, the clock had started ticking. And Jackson Carter, he wasn't just the man from that night anymore. He was the father of her unborn child. Jackson Carter closed the office door behind them with a quiet click. Not the kind of slam that rattles the windows, but the kind that says, "This conversation will happen whether you like it or not." Samantha stood near the glass wall, her arms folded tightly across her chest folder, clutched like a shield. Outside, the skyline of Chicago buzzed with early morning energy. Cars inching down Lakeshore Drive, a hint of sun glinting off high-rise windows. But inside, the air was frozen. Jackson didn't sit behind his imposing mahogany desk. Instead, he pulled out the leather chair across from it, the one usually reserved for investors and board members, and motioned for her to sit. She didn't move. "Samantha," he said, quieter now, almost gently, "please." She finally nodded, settling into the chair, her back-straight eyes locked on a neutral spot over his shoulder. "I just want to talk," he began, voice low and calm, but threaded with something sharp, "about the ultrasound, about the date." She said nothing. "I remember that night," he continued. "Every detail. You were wearing a navy blue dress. You laughed when I told you I hated caviar. You said I looked too serious for someone who danced that well." Her eyes flickered, just for a moment. He leaned forward slightly. "And I remember waking up alone. I didn't know your name, but I never forgot your face." "I never meant for this to happen," Samantha whispered, fingers tightening around her folder. "That night, it was supposed to be just that. One night. I understand that," he replied, "but now, this isn't just about us anymore, is it?" Silence. Jackson sighed, then reached into the breast pocket of his jacket and pulled out the ultrasound photo. He laid it gently on the table between them. "May 10, he said softly. 12 weeks along, that place's conception, around the gala, 11 weeks ago." She closed her eyes. There was no point pretending anymore. "Yes," she said, "it's yours." The words felt like stepping off a cliff. Jackson nodded, slowly absorbing it. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't know how," she said, her voice cracking. "I found out 2 weeks after I started here. I was already in. And you, CEO, public figure. Every woman in this building watches the elevator just to catch a glimpse of you." "I don't care about them," Jackson said, his voice low. "I care that you didn't think I had the right to know." Samantha's jaw tightened. "What would you have done?" "Jackson sent a lawyer to my door with a confidentiality agreement and a check." He blinked. "Do you really think that's who I am?" "I don't know who you are," she snapped, finally looking at him. "I know one night where you weren't wearing a tie or being chased by stock analysts. One night where we were just two people on a rooftop pretending the world didn't exist." Jackson leaned back, clearly struck by the raw honesty in her voice. "I want to be involved," he said, after a long pause. "I don't know what that looks like yet, but I need you to understand that this child matters. You won't go through this alone." A storm swirled behind Samantha's eyes, part fear, part relief. She'd imagined him being angry, dismissive, but this sincerity. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "Not money, not favors, not even your time. I just wanted to figure it out quietly." "Well," he said, running a hand through his dark hair, "that plan kind of went out the window when you dropped the baby's first portrait at my feet." That got a ghost of a smile out of her. "Yeah, that was not ideal." He leaned forward again. "Listen, I know this is complicated. I'm your boss. You work here, but we can find a way through this." Her defenses flared again. Workplace rumors spread fast. People won't care about the truth. They'll just see the headlines. "Young employee pregnant with CEO's baby." My work, my credibility, gone. Jackson didn't flinch. "I get it. I do. But let's take it one step at a time. We don't need to solve everything right now." He paused, then added, "Have dinner with me tonight." She stared at him, incredulous. "I'm not asking for a date," he said quickly. "I'm asking for a conversation. A real one. Away from this office. Away from the pressure." Samantha hesitated. Every instinct told her to retreat. But another part of her, the part that remembered the rooftop, the soft music, the way he listened, said maybe, just maybe, she owed it to herself, to the child. "Okay," she said finally. "Dinner?" He let out a slow breath. "I'll send a car at 7. As she stood to leave, he reached out and gently touched her arm. "Thank you for trusting me with this." She didn't answer, but as she stepped out into the hallway, her heart pounding, she realized something she hadn't expected for the first time since the 2 pink lines appeared on that test stick. She didn't feel entirely alone. The city glimmered under a soft twilight haze as Samantha Dawson stood in front of her modest walk-up apartment, staring at a growing pile of clothes strewn across her bed. Her roommate Tessa, bright, blunt, and unapologetically nosy, leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed and eyebrow cocked. "You know, for someone about to have dinner with a billionaire CEO/baby daddy, you're really overthinking that black dress." Samantha groaned, tossing the dress aside. This isn't just dinner. It's a corporate landmine, and an emotional one, and a hormonal one. Also, I have nothing to wear that says, I'm pregnant with your twins and still capable of handling a quarterly financial forecast. Tessa smirked. Try the green wrap dress. You always look calm and terrifyingly competent in that one. Samantha hesitated. Green. The same color she'd worn the night of the gala. She slipped it on. By the time the sleek black Lincoln pulled up outside at exactly 7 Sagueros p.m., she was dressed nauseated and trying to remember how to breathe. The driver, a kindly older man named Walter, greeted her with a warm smile. Miss Dawson, Mr. Carter asked me to extend his apologies. He's finishing a call, but we'll meet you at the restaurant. Of course, business before, whatever this was. As the car pulled away, Samantha rested a protective hand on her stomach. This is just a conversation, she whispered to herself. Not a life-altering moment. Definitely not a date. But her heart said otherwise. Oh, instead of pulling up to one of the city's overbooked, paparazzi-swarmed rooftop eateries, the car wound its way into an old residential neighborhood, tree-lined and quiet worlds away from corporate towers and business headlines. Walter stopped in front of a restored brick colonial house with a brass sign beside the door that read, Juneberry. Mr. Carter owns this place, Walter explained as he opened the door for her. Used to belong to his grandmother. He turned it into a private dining space. The door creaked open, and an elderly woman with soft eyes and silver hair welcomed her inside. Miss Dawson, she said kindly, taking her coat. I'm Margaret. Mr. Carter is waiting in the library. Library. Samantha followed the scent of something warm and spiced into a room lined with bookshelves and antique fixtures. The fireplace crackled gently, and there, standing beside a small table set for two, was Jackson. Gone was the executive armor. He wore dark jeans, a slate gray sweater, and an expression she didn't recognize. Hopeful, maybe even nervous. You look beautiful, he said, simply pulling out a chair for her. She sat down slowly. This place is not what I expected. He smiled. Good. I didn't want to talk in a place with 6 waiters and people Instagramming their lobster bisque. As Margaret brought sparkling water and a small dish of warm bread, Samantha took a moment to soak it in. The quiet, the honesty. The man sitting across from her, who, just this morning, was her boss, and nothing more. Now he was about to become something else entirely. I wanted to explain something. Jackson began, his tone serious but gentle, about who I was before that night, and why you, matter more than you know. He pulled out a photo album worn at the edges and turned it toward her. The image showed a teenage Jackson, thinner, softer, standing beside a blonde girl with a radiant smile and a belly swollen with pregnancy. That's Emily, he said quietly. We were 17, high school sweethearts. She got pregnant our senior year. Samantha's breath caught. She passed away in her 7th month, Jackson continued, voice trembling. Complications. The baby didn't survive either. Silence settled like snowfall. I've never talked about it publicly, he added, but it changed me. Losing her. Losing him. I built everything after that, with this hollow space inside me. And I promised myself that if I ever had the chance again, if I ever became a father, I wouldn't run from it. I wouldn't take it for granted. He looked at her now, eyes raw. So, when I saw that ultrasound, I wasn't shocked, I was terrified. But I was also strangely thankful. Samantha's hands trembled in her lap. I had no idea. I didn't want your pity. I wanted your trust. Margaret reappeared with 2 bowls of something homemade, chicken stew that smelled like comfort in rainy days. My grandmother's recipe, Jackson offered. She raised me after my parents died. Said the best conversations happened over simple food. As they ate, the wall between them began to crack. They talked, really talked, about loss, fear, ambition, and what it meant to wake up and find your life irrevocably changed. When dessert came, a warm peach cobbler with vanilla ice cream, Samantha couldn't help but laugh. Now you're just emotionally manipulating me with sugar, she teased. Is it working? She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. A little. He leaned forward, the firelight flickering in his eyes. I'm not asking for promises tonight, just a chance. To be someone you can count on. For you, for the baby. She lowered her spoon. I don't even know if I can count on myself right now. Then let's start there, he said softly. One step, one breath, one meal at a time. And in that quiet room filled with old books, warm stew, and the weight of unspoken futures, Samantha realized something unexpected. For the first time since the ultrasound, she felt safe. The fire crackled quietly in the corner of the old library room, casting warm amber glows across the dark hardwood floor and flickering against the bookshelves that stretched from wall to wall. The conversation had quieted, but the atmosphere between Samantha and Jackson remained thick with something unspoken, history being rewritten in real time. She set down her fork, brushing a crumb from her lap, and asked softly, "So, this house really belonged to your grandmother?" Jackson nodded, leaning back slightly in his chair. "Yeah. She bought it with the settlement money after the accident. My parents, it was a highway pileup. I was 8. My whole world changed overnight." His voice was even, but the edge behind his words told a different story. Samantha didn't interrupt. She let the silence hold space. "She raised me here," he continued, his gaze drifting to the corner bookshelf. "I went to college on scholarships, built the company from a dingy rental above a dry cleaner, but this place, this was always home. When she passed, I couldn't sell it. Margaret, her caretaker, convinced me to turn it into something meaningful." Samantha's gaze softened. "You don't talk like someone who grew up with silver spoons." "Because I didn't," he replied. "What people see now, the suits, the headlines. It's the version I became, not where I started." Margaret returned this time with 2 steaming mugs of chamomile tea. "Dessert will be out in a few," she said kindly, and placed a soft hand on Jackson's shoulder before stepping back out. Samantha smiled faintly. "She loves you. She tolerates me," Jackson joked, but the affection in his voice was obvious. For a long while they sipped tea in silence. Then he cleared his throat and leaned forward. "There's something else I've never told anyone. Not the board, not the press, not even my closest friends." Samantha blinked. "What?" Jackson reached behind him to a small cabinet, opened the drawer, and pulled out an old leather-bound folder. Inside was a clipping from a newspaper, faded, slightly torn. He handed it to her. The headline read, "Pharma Empire Crumbles Amid Scandal. Bennett Pharmaceuticals Files for Bankruptcy." Her eyes flicked to the subhead, "CEO Jonathan Bennett and wife killed in crash. 8-year-old son survives." She looked up slowly. "Jonathan Bennett." "My father," Jackson said simply. "But your last name is Carter." He nodded. "I changed it when I turned 18. I didn't want his legacy to be mine." Samantha's fingers gripped the paper. "I remember this. The lawsuits, the fake drug trials. People died." He nodded grimly. "My mother begged him to stop. She was a biochemist. She warned him about cutting corners. But he wouldn't listen. When the truth came out, the media descended. Investors fled. Then the crash happened. And you've been hiding this ever since she asked." "Hiding," he shook his head. "No, burying. I didn't want my success to be overshadowed by his disgrace. I built Carter and Crest from nothing. I changed everything about who I was. Except," he trailed off, "except the guilt Samantha finished for him." Jackson looked at her, his expression raw. "You said earlier that you don't know who I am, and you were right. But I want you to, because if we're going to raise a child, or children, together, you deserve to know the whole truth." Her hand rested lightly over her belly, barely rounded beneath the fabric of her dress. "You've carried a lot." "So have you?" he replied, alone. They stared at each other for a long time, the weight of all that hadn't been said finally lifting in the stillness. Margaret returned with dessert, homemade apple pie with vanilla bean ice cream. It filled the room with cinnamon and sugar and something deeper comfort. "My grandmother's specialty," Jackson said quietly. "She used to tell me that no matter how broken life feels, dessert helps." Samantha let out a small, unexpected laugh. "That sounds like something my mom would have said." "Where is she?" he asked gently. "Texas. We're close, but I haven't told her yet. About the pregnancy. About you." His eyes searched hers. "Would you want me there when you do?" She looked at him. Really looked at him. Not the billionaire CEO, not the man from the gala, but the orphaned boy, the heartbroken teenager, the man who had every reason to wall off the world, but instead was offering her a seat at his table. "I don't know yet," she answered honestly. "But I appreciate that you'd ask." They shared the pie in silence, trading soft smiles and unspoken acknowledgments that something had shifted. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something that could grow. As the fire dwindled and the shadows deepened, Samantha asked, "Why now, Jackson? Why share this with me?" He didn't hesitate, because trust has to start somewhere. And if there's even the possibility that we build something more than co-parenting, something real, then I want to lay the foundation on truth, not press releases, not silence. And for the first time since she found out she was pregnant, Samantha believed that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to walk this road alone. The fire was dying down, casting long shadows on the walls of the cozy library-turned-dining room. As Margaret cleared the dessert plates, Samantha stood slowly, needing a moment to breathe. "Do you mind if I look around?" she asked. Jackson, seated at the edge of the leather chair, glanced up from the photo album he had reopened. "Of course. Take your time." She walked along the shelves, her fingers tracing the worn spines of books that had clearly been read and reread: To Kill a Mockingbird, The Great Gatsby, Ender's Game, classics, personal favorites, A Life in Pages. Then something odd. Tucked behind a row of chemistry textbooks was a thin wooden frame, partially obscured. She leaned in and gently pulled it free. Inside was an old news clipping, yellowed and folded behind glass. Her eyes narrowed. It wasn't just any article. It was from a national paper dated 15 years ago. The headline made her stomach tighten. Bennett Pharma. Collapse, thousands affected by recall scandal. There it was again. The name Bennett. She flipped the frame over, checking the source Wall Street Bulletin, same year the other article Jackson had shown her came out. But this one went deeper. As she skimmed the subheadings, she saw mentions of falsified research class action lawsuits and a devastating medication recall that had led to dozens of patient deaths. The photo in the article showed Jonathan Bennett in handcuffs, being escorted by federal agents just weeks before the fatal car accident. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't just the story of a failed company. It was a national tragedy, and Jackson had never publicly acknowledged any connection. Samantha Jackson's voice called gently from the table. She turned quickly, tucking the frame back into place. But he saw the look on her face. "What is it?" I found another article," she said cautiously, "behind the books, about Bennett Pharma." He froze, then stood. "I wasn't digging," she added quickly. "It was just partially visible." He walked over slowly, tension rippling through him. "Did you read it?" "I skimmed it," she admitted. "But Jackson, why hide it?" His jaw tightened. For the first time that evening, the warmth in his expression flickered. "It's not that I'm ashamed," he said quietly. "It's that I've spent every day since I was 18 trying not to let his legacy define mine." He turned, pacing slowly to the edge of the room. "When I applied for college, I used my middle name, Carter. I legally changed it 2 years later. I worked double shifts, took night classes, started my company in a rented closet above a laundromat. Because no investor wanted to trust a Bennett. Not after what my father did." Samantha stepped closer, watching him wrestle with the past, like it had hands around his throat. "I didn't want my employees Googling me and finding that he continued. Didn't want clients questioning if I had inherited his ethics. So I buried it, not to deceive anyone, but to protect what I built." She was quiet for a moment. "I understand, but I think you're underestimating how far you've come. You didn't inherit a company. You clawed your way out of a crater." He turned, surprised. "I wasn't sure what to think when I saw that article," she admitted. "But after tonight, after everything you've shared, I don't see Jonathan Bennett's son." Her voice softened. "I see you." His shoulders relaxed just slightly. "You're the first person I've ever told all of this to. Voluntarily." "Well," she said with a faint smile, "it's a big night for both of us." They stood in silence for a moment, the fire now little more than glowing embers. "I'm sorry if it felt like I was keeping secrets," he said, "but I wasn't hiding this from you. I've just never known how to face it head on." "I get it," she said. "We all have things we'd rather leave buried, but the fact that you told me, that matters." He gave a slight nod, a grateful flicker in his eyes. "Does it change anything?" Samantha considered this. "No," she said finally. "If anything, it helps me understand you better." She paused, stepping forward until she was just inches from him. "And it makes me believe you when you say you won't run from this, from us, from the baby." Their eyes locked, And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Recognition. Not of what they had been or what they were now, but of what they could become. Jackson reached out gently, his hand brushing hers. "I want to try," he said. "To be honest, to be present, to build something better than what I came from." And though neither of them said the word aloud, the seed of something fragile, hope, was beginning to bloom. They returned to the table as Margaret re-entered to stoke the fire and retrieve the dishes. The evening wasn't over yet, but the walls between them had started to come down one truth at a time. Later that same night, under a velvety navy sky and the gentle hush of downtown Chicago, the sharp scent of rain lingered in the air as Jackson's town car pulled to a quiet stop outside one of the city's private medical facilities. Inside the vehicle, Samantha was hunched over slightly, her knuckles white against the leather seat. She winced as another sharp cramp pulled across her lower abdomen. "I don't think this is normal," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Jackson, seated beside her, was already on his phone. Walter called Dr. Hanley. "Tell him we're en route. Tell him it's urgent." "Yes, sir," the driver replied calmly. "Already did. He's waiting." Samantha hadn't said much since the cramping started near the end of dinner. She'd brushed it off at first. Probably just indigestion, she said, or the stress catching up with her. But the sudden sharpness of the pain and the look that flickered in her eyes told Jackson otherwise. "Almost there," he said, reaching across to gently place his hand over hers. It was shaking. "Hey," he whispered, "you're not alone. I've got you. No matter what happens, I'm here." Her eyes flicked up to meet his, fearful but grateful. Minutes later, they were ushered through a private entrance into the pristine, softly lit exam room. Dr. Hanley, a trusted physician on Jackson's private team, was already gloving up beside the ultrasound machine. "Miss Dawson," he greeted her warmly. "Let's take a look, shall we?" Samantha lay back on the exam bed, her heart hammering in her chest. Jackson stood at her side, still in his charcoal sweater from dinner, now rumpled with stress. He reached for her hand again, and this time she squeezed back. As Dr. Hanley spread the cool gel across her abdomen and adjusted the ultrasound wand, the monitor flickered to life. Fuzzy grayscale images dancing across the screen. The seconds stretched. Samantha held her breath. Please, she thought, please let there still be a heartbeat. Dr. Hanley's brow furrowed in concentration. Then slowly his expression softened into something calm, assured. "There it is," he said, gently turning the screen toward them. "Strong heartbeat. Everything looks good." Samantha exhaled with such force it came out as a sob. Jackson let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "You're experiencing something called round ligament pain." Dr. Hanley continued, "Totally normal, especially as the uterus expands. Painful, yes, but not dangerous. Your body's adjusting to carrying a growing baby." Samantha laughed through her tears. "So, my insides are rearranging furniture." Basically, Dr. Hanley smiled. Relief flooded her, soaking into her bones. She looked up at Jackson, whose eyes hadn't left the screen. But Dr. Hanley wasn't finished. He adjusted the wand slightly, eyes narrowing as he studied the monitor more closely. He murmured. "Wait a second." Samantha's heart stopped. "What is it?" Jackson asked, already stepping forward. The doctor leaned in, pointing to two distinct flickering shapes on the screen. "Do you see this?" he said, his voice edged with fascination. "That's baby A, and this," he tapped another area, "is baby B." Samantha blinked. I don't understand." Dr. Hanley grinned. "You're having twins." For a moment, no one spoke. The air shifted. "Twins." Jackson repeated the word, barely registering. Samantha stared at the monitor, speechless. 2 heartbeats. 2 tiny, fluttering flickers. Dr. Hanley nodded, fraternal from the looks of it. Both strong, both developing beautifully. The doctor began outlining next steps. Prenatal vitamins, extra monitoring, a nutrition plan. But the words blurred in the background. Samantha was still staring at the screen. Twins. She turned her head toward Jackson, whose face was a tapestry of emotion, astonishment, awe, and something deeper. Then he laughed, a disbelieving, joyful sound that echoed through the sterile room. 2, he said. "There are 2. And then he looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing not just the woman he'd shared a night with, not just the financial analyst in his company, but the mother of his children. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. She nodded slowly, though tears brimmed in her eyes again. I'm overwhelmed. I was barely wrapping my head around one baby. Now it's two. How am I going to do this? Jackson took her hands in his, holding them firmly. Not you. How are we going to do this? Her lips trembled. You mean that? With everything I've got, he said. Samantha. I know we're figuring this out as we go, but I'm all in. Every step, every scan, every midnight craving, every panic attack, every baby book. I'm not going anywhere. For a long beat, she stared at him, letting the weight of his words settle around her like armor. Safe, whole. I don't know if I'm strong enough, she whispered. You don't have to be, he replied. We'll be strong together. And as Dr. Hanley quietly stepped out to give them a moment, Jackson pulled the chair closer and rested his hand over hers on her stomach. Two lives fluttered beneath their hands. Unexpected, unplanned, but suddenly more real than anything either of them had ever imagined. The fear was still there. So was the uncertainty. But in the space between those two heartbeats, something else had bloomed. A beginning. 3 days after the hospital visit, Samantha stood at the window of her small but cozy apartment, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold long ago. Outside, the city moved with its usual rhythm. Cars, honking buses, sighing to a stop, people rushing to meetings. But inside her mind, everything had slowed to a crawl. Twins. Every time she said the word, even just in her thoughts, it echoed like a thunderclap. She was growing two tiny humans. With Jackson Carter, her phone buzzed on the counter. Another email from HR asking if she was available for a check-in this week. She hadn't responded yet. What was she supposed to say? Hi, I'm the pregnant analyst carrying the CEO's twins. Can we schedule around my next nausea wave? A knock on the door pulled her out of the spiral. She opened it to find Jackson holding a paper bag in one hand and 2 coffees in the other. You weren't returning texts, he said, so I thought I'd bribe you with bagels. She blinked, caught between surprise and relief. You didn't have to. I wanted to, he interrupted gently. She stepped aside to let him in, clearing the couch of a few laundry items as he made his way to the kitchen. Hazelnut for you, he said, handing her the coffee, and cinnamon raisin with honey cream cheese because you said, and I quote, it's the only thing that makes the world feel manageable. She stared at him. You remembered that. He smiled faintly. I remember a lot of things. They sat across from each other in the kitchen nook, sunlight washing over them like a quiet witness. After a few minutes of tentative small talk, Samantha set her cup down and looked up. I've been thinking about work, she said. Jackson immediately grew still. I know we said we'd take it one step at a time, she continued, but I can't pretend this isn't going to change things. He nodded slowly. You're right, it will. And I've actually been thinking about that too. She arched an eyebrow. Oh, I had a call with Westfield Financial. Yesterday, he said, their CEO, David Tran, asked if I would consider releasing you from your contract. She froze. Wait, what? They want you back. Apparently their restructuring was a disaster. They realized how much they lost when you left. Samantha blinked. But why would you even entertain that conversation? Because I care about your career, Jackson said. And I know how hard it's going to be to stay at Carter and Crest without whispers, without side eyes. You don't deserve that. You deserve to be where your work speaks louder than your personal life. She stared at him stunned. They're offering you a director position, he added. Higher pay, more flexibility. And it's a clean break. No favoritism, no accusations of sleeping your way up. Just you doing what you're brilliant at. And you just let me go, she asked, voice small. He leaned forward. This isn't about letting you go. This is about protecting you. Your name, your work, your future. She swallowed hard. What about us? She asked quietly. If I leave the company, are you planning to, what co-parent from a distance, go back to being my polite ex-stranger? His lips twitched into a smile. Actually, I was hoping we might date. She stared at him. Date, she repeated. Yeah, he said. The real kind. Dinners, movies, arguments over takeout orders. Getting to know each other's favorite colors and weird quirks. She laughed despite herself. That's not exactly how people usually start a relationship. True, he admitted. But then again, most people don't start with twins. A beat passed. Then she asked, teasing, Okay then, what's my favorite color? Green, he said, without hesitation. She blinked. How? At the gala, you said the emerald necklace the museum director wore caught your eye because green was your favorite. I remember. She stared at him, warmth rising in her chest. Your turn, he said. Your favorite's blue. Obviously, everything you own is blue. He shook his head. That's branding, not preference. My real favorite is orange. Orange, she said, wrinkling her nose. He grinned. My mom used to paint sunrises. The walls of our living room were covered in them. I guess it just stuck. And just like that, something unspoken passed between them. Vulnerability, history, intimacy. Not the kind built over years, but the kind born when people stop pretending. Samantha leaned back, looking at him closely. You're full of surprises. You have no idea, he replied. They sat in quiet again, sipping coffee, the morning sun catching in Samantha's hair. I'm scared, she said suddenly, about everything. The pregnancy, the move, us. I am too, Jackson said. But I think maybe being scared is a sign that it matters. She gave a small smile. You really want to do this? With you? Yeah, he said, I do. She took a long sip from her coffee. Then maybe, she said slowly, we start with dinner and go from there. The front door creaked open with the unmistakable sound of tiny feet padding quickly across hardwood floors, followed by a chorus of giggles that echoed through the morning air like music. Da-da, a little voice squealed with unrestrained glee. Jackson Carter barely had time to set down his laptop bag before a tiny blur of energy launched into his legs, arms outstretched like a missile of affection. Well, good morning to you too, buddy. Jackson laughed, scooping up his son and pressing a kiss to his wild brown curls. Thomas Carter, nearly a year and a half old, grinned proudly and slapped his father's tie like it was a toy. Behind him, his sister, Charlene, or Charlie, as she was known to everyone except Grandma, walked over with slow determination, cradling her favorite stuffed duck. Dada, she said more softly, offering the plush toy as if it were a gift of great importance. Jackson crouched and accepted the duck with exaggerated reverence. Thank you, Miss Charlie. A most generous offering. In the doorway of the open kitchen, Samantha leaned against the frame, arms folded, a smile blooming across her face as she watched the scene unfold. 18 months ago, this moment would have been unimaginable. Back then, she was a newly hired financial analyst, pregnant, terrified, and clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, she could manage things on her own. But today was noisy and sticky and chaotic in the best possible way. Did you survive the board meeting? She asked, as Jackson stood, Thomas in one arm and the duck in the other. Barely, he replied. I think we spent 45 minutes debating the color palette for the new app interface. Let me guess. Someone insisted on more blue. Obviously, he grinned. If only they knew my heart really belongs to orange. She laughed, crossing the room to take Thomas, who had already started squirming, to go back to his block tower. Don't forget, we've got Charlie's pediatric checkup at 4, she said. And your mom's coming over to babysit tonight, right? She wouldn't miss it. Jackson leaned in and kissed her temple. Then it's a date. Just us. They exchanged a look, comfortable, loving, and effortlessly in sync. The kind of look that only comes from walking through fire and choosing to hold hands anyway. As Jackson headed upstairs to change out of his work clothes, Samantha found herself drifting to the mantel above the fireplace. Nestled between framed photos of the twins' first birthday and their Christmas in Vermont was a small silver frame containing the ultrasound image that had started everything. The one she'd dropped in the lobby that day. The one that had landed at Jackson's feet like a spark, igniting a slow, burning miracle. Beneath the photo, engraved in tiny script, were the words, "The day our story began." She reached out and gently touched the frame, her heart full. What began as uncertainty had become a home. What once felt like a complication had become her family. Behind her, Charlie squealed as Thomas knocked over her block tower with a dramatic belly flop. Jackson's voice floated down the stairs. Hey, no block tower bullying. Samantha turned, shaking her head and laughing. Life was louder now, messier, unpredictable. But it was hers. And it was perfect. Some stories begin with grand gestures or fairy tale moments. Others begin quietly, with a conversation, a choice, or, in Samantha's case, a photo that slipped from her fingers and landed in front of a man she never expected to see again. It's easy to think we can control the trajectory of our lives, to plan, to organize, to stay ahead of every twist. But the the most meaningful chapters often begin with the unexpected. When Samantha walked into Carter and Crest Technologies that morning, she wasn't looking for a second chance. She was trying to hold her world together. And when Jackson Carter picked up that ultrasound photo, he wasn't thinking about the future. He was simply remembering a moment that had meant more than he'd realized. But what followed was growth, vulnerability, a willingness to show up in the face of fear. Because families aren't just born, they're built. One moment, one decision, one honest conversation at a time. And sometimes love doesn't begin with butterflies or bold declarations. Sometimes it starts with a quiet promise whispered in a hospital room or a cup of coffee shared at the kitchen table. Samantha and Jackson's story is one of redemption, not from mistakes, but from fear, of rewriting the narrative they thought they were bound to, of choosing every day to create a home grounded in truth, trust, and tenderness. As their twins grow, so does the love between them. Not rushed, not forced, but steady, real. And that's what makes this story unforgettable. Because in the end, it reminds us all, the life we least expect might just be the one we were always meant to live.